And welcome to today's special episode. And today I've got someone that I've had on the show before, going back all the way back to 2023, and you might recognise him from calling races and or commentating on races on IMSA Radio, and the radio show Limited Team, and also as well calling some other various races and series as well, from Creventic to the Dubai 24, and yeah, also doing some stuff for the FIA European Rally Championship. And his name's Peter MacKay. It's good to have you back on for a catch up.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. I'm delighted to be here and catch up.
And yeah, how's motorsport life been treating you? I know you've been a bit of a busy boy.
Yeah, it's been pretty good. Yeah, 2026 is it got off to a good start. Yeah, I did the Jana Rally in Austria for the first time at the very beginning of January, first weekend in January. Myself and Holly McRae did commentary for that, live stream commentary, which was great. I mean, I love rallying and love commentary, but it's rare that I get to do both at the same time. So that was really special to do that. Lots of time on air. And then a few weeks after that, it was the Rolex 24 at Daytona, which is a huge event to be involved with. And this year, I couldn't believe the figures that came in on the live stream. They had 3.8 million viewers on the YouTube stream alone, and of course many more on IMSA Radio as well. So we were really pleased with that, and hopefully we'll carry the momentum into Sebring, which is where I head off to next. So I've had plenty of time between Daytona and Sebring to get prepared and do some other things as well. But yeah, it's time to get back out on the road again.
Yeah, you talk about that. You talk about the commentating on the rally you just mentioned with Holly McRae. I mean, obviously she's a big name because she's the daughter of Colin McRae, who we all know he was world champion in 1995 and had pretty much everyone. It doesn't matter what motorsport discipline you watch. He's a big name. It always gets mentioned. And how did it feel calling that stuff alongside Holly? I mean, I've watched some of her YouTube stuff or social media stuff. She just comes across as really, I don't know, like really enthusiastic about rallying and just basically promoting or showing something that she loves. How did you find that being alongside her? Was it one of those pinch me moments?
It is a little bit, because when I was 4 years old, my mum took me to a rally for the first time. It's pretty much my first memory, full stop. We see Malcolm Wilson burst into view in Michelin Pilot Ford Escort RS Cosworth, and then a year later, Colin won the World Championship in 1995, and that was really, I remember how excited my mum was at the time, and then by association how excited I was, and then that was really in Colin's peak era from 95 through to sort of 2002, where I was highly impressionable and used to rush to get Autosport every Thursday and read about how he'd got on. You'd hear about him in the radio, and so when Holly came to join our team in the European Rally Championship as a stagehand reporter, it was really, really cool. And Holly's how would I put this? She's knows that because of her second name, there's a lot of eyes on her, and there's a lot of people who want her involved. But she is a real professional. Whatever it is that she's doing within the motorsports sphere and the media sphere, she puts 100% into it, and she does her preparation and asks questions, and whatever advice she receives, she puts it in place. And that event at the Jana Rally was the first time she'd ever actually done commentary before, and she took to it so well. So it's more than anything, it's just a pleasure to work with her. She's a really, really nice person to work with. Got to meet her mum as well, and she's equally a lovely person too. So it's been really enjoyable getting to know her, and she's become a good friend in the in the industry. It's been good to be able to offer some advice and then also learn stuff from her. I need to ask her how I get my social media better, because that's her expertise and definitely not mine. So maybe I need to pick her brains on that one.
Yeah, I've noticed that as well. I mean, like I mentioned, I've watched quite a lot of her stuff on YouTube, and she seems to be like you say, she seems to know how to do like social media stuff. Like really, it's like kind of like as she's done it before. Basically, I don't know if she's maybe had practice doing it before she's got into like rallying or motorsport in general. So, but yeah, I've been impressed by her, and I think she's one of those people that she's got. I think anyway, she's got a big future ahead of her. If that's in commentary or maybe like journalism or reporting or anything like that. But I think she's going to be a person to keep an eye on.
Yeah, I agree.
How did your introduction to motorsport come about? Basically, like you say, your mum took you to a rally, but was there anything else that got you into motorsport? Like basically a different I don't know a word, like trajectory, if you like.
Yeah, I think mum was the big influence, really. When I was growing up, my dad had a very busy job and had to travel a lot, and that meant mum didn't actually have to work. So we spent a lot of time together when I was growing up, and I mean, she's now in her she's now older than she was then, but she's still pretty sprightly behind the wheel, is my mum. Yeah, but in those days when I was a kid, she was very sprightly behind the wheel. So I think that was a part of it. And then my grandfather on my mum's side was really into it as well. He was very, very into the kind of history behind Jim Clark, and had been involved in raising money for a bronze sculpture of him in his birthplace in Kilmeny in Fife. He was kind of raised and from the borders, but he was actually born in Kilmeny in Fife, and there's a lovely bronze sculpture that was created by a guy called David Annan. So that I'm sure had an effect as well. But I have to say, I do think that Autosport magazine in those days, every Thursday I would drag my mum down to Gary's paper shop to get the weekly edition of Autosport magazine, and it was. And in those days, unlike Autosport's changed a little bit now, but in the last couple of years of Autosport as a weekly magazine, it seemed to have Formula One on the front cover every single week, excuse me. Whereas in those days, it wouldn't be unusual to have WRC on the front cover, and then it would be Formula One, or then it'd be British touring cars. There'd be something else, and I think that variety was important. I think also Knockhill definitely played a part. I mean, I always wanted to get taken to Knockhill to go to the British Touring Car Championship, and in those days, British Touring Cars was on BBC Grandstand and on a Sunday, and you had the Toka Touring Car game. You had Colin McRae Rally game, and so it was just I think when you ask that, it kind of stirs it up, and you think it wasn't just one thing; it was lots of things that all combined together at that time. Yeah, my dad had he's not really a car guy per se, I wouldn't say so, but he had in '97 he got a Volvo T5 as his company car, and that was a pretty cool car. It had that 5-cylinder engine in it, and I remember the sound of that car specifically. It had very comfy seats. Well, Volvos do for some reason, but that maybe played a little part as well. So it was just a melting pot of things. I think so.
Yeah, I mean, or basically my kind of like kickstart or into watching motorsport was kind of similar to yours, but you'd kind of expect to be like a I don't know if it's right to say it, but you'd kind of expect like a male member of your family or my family to get me into motorsport. But what's it kind of happened in a way, but it was my mother that basically introduced me to motorsport. I would say kind of like kickstarted my interest, and basically went to my uncle because my uncle was basically going to. I don't know if you've heard of the oval track in Fife, Cow Beef Racewell.
Oh yeah.
So that's basically where my interest started. But my mother went to my uncle. Do you fancy taking him to see how he'd find it, being a young kid and that? So yeah, my uncle was like, yeah, I'll take him and basically show him what it's about and see how he likes it. And as soon as I got it, basically as I was like walking about looking at cars and that, I was like, yep, my interest sparked into life. So That's basically where my interest in motorsport started. Basically, like oval racing, by a certain David Addison. Similar to him, that's how it all started, and then basically it kind of progressed to different series, like basically British GT. What else? Not GT World Challenge as it was called back then. I think it was what was it? It used to be called in the 90s. Was it a
Would that be BPR?
BPR? That's the one. Yeah.
Yeah, because that was Jurgen Barth, Patrick Peter, and Stefan Rattel.
Yep.
Of course, Stefan Rattel's Mr. SRO. Yeah.
So basically, that was one of my first series that I watched back as a kid, I guess. And then basically, my interest in GT racing and sports car racing in general kind of progressed through the years. And I think when it comes to like big series, say like not the World Endurance Championship as it's called now. I think it was called was it Le Mans Series or something like that, or Intercontinental Le Mans Series. So that was basically how my interest came about. And then basically, when it comes to Le Mans, I think my first Le Mans that I watched on TV was back in. Actually, it was back 2003 when Bentley won with the Speed 8, I think it was.
Oh, I remember that.
So
yeah.
that was basically
one of the best sports cars ever built, I think. Short-lived, but very cool car.
But that was basically my first Le Mans that I watched on TV, and ever since then I've been a bit of a Le Mans geek, Le Mans fanatic, whatever you want to call it. And I mentioned Le Mans actually. I'm actually visiting Le Mans for the first time this year, so looking forward to that.
Yeah, you're going to love it. I experienced it for the first time on site last year, and it's the sheer size of it is it's quite difficult to take in. In fact, you'll see more of it as a fan than you will in the paddock. That might sound odd, but it's so packed in, and the hospitality units are so big. It's so difficult to get anywhere near any of the pits, or like you would in, say, in America.
Yeah.
Like going to Daytona, you get so much more access in America than you do at Le Mans. But when you're on the fan side, you can walk around and see the whole place, go and see Porsche curves and things like that. So yeah, you're going to love it.
Yeah, and talking about Le Mans as well, are you part of the team for this year, or is that still up in the air?
I believe so. Yeah, I believe so. So it's going to be a pretty busy time for me. My wife is due with our son, our first child, about a month before Le Mans. So yeah, so it's a very busy time of year for work. So I'm actually going to Le Mans to get more sleep than I probably will at home, which is unusual. It's normally the other way around. You don't get much sleep at all at Le Mans. So yeah, it's going to be a slightly different one this year, but looking forward to it. It's always a privilege to get to go in and be involved in any way in that event.
And then also Le Mans. Obviously, I say I'm going to Le Mans for the first time this year. I'm also basically after watching the Roar Before the 24 streams over the weekend before the actual race weekend. I actually decided to basically like pull the trigger, pull the plug, whatever you want to call it, and actually bought tickets for to go next year. So yep, mega excited for that. So
honestly. If I was to really be put on the spot and say Le Mans or Daytona, I'd actually choose Daytona because I think it's because it's the first big event of the year. There's not much. There's no Formula One going on. It's not trying to compete with anything else. It's the major endurance race, the major race, full stop, in that time of year. You have it always comes down to a dogfight in the last couple of hours. But as a fan, there is nothing like it in terms of access. You can get right up close to the best sports car machines in the world and the drivers. The grid walk is free. It's easy to get around the circuit. It's just the atmosphere of it is amazing. With the big banking, you hear the cars echoing around the banking. I love it. I love it. I think it's actually still, in terms of, I think for European fans, I actually think it's still relatively unknown just how impressive an event it is. You're gonna love it. You are gonna absolutely love it.
Yeah, I mean, my plan originally was to go to Daytona in 2028, but like I say, I was watching the streams and I thought I want to go a year early, so I thought I've decided to go in 2027, and I'm looking forward to it. And how is the track for accessibility? So say if I wanted to go from say like the grandstands to what's over in the banking, or
Yeah.
Is
Yeah,
it
you
easy? Is
can.
it easy to?
It's. I mean, it's a big place. It's
Yeah.
a really big place. I mean, the oval's 2.5 miles long, but yeah, it's doable. There's walkways underneath the circuit. So yeah, it's absolutely doable. You can be in the grandstand. You can be in the paddock. I mean, being in the paddock is brilliant because you could be watching at, say, the Kink in the infield, which is a great place to watch. There's plenty of bleachers to sit on there. But if, say, you're sitting and listening to the commentary and you think, oh, the Wayland Cadillac's been pushed behind the wall, you can then run to the you can be at the Wayland garage in 5 minutes, and it's not, they don't put the door down. You can be
You can
right
actually
up close.
watch what's going on.
You can watch them repairing a car, and if you sort of wander around the paddock at night and wait for something to happen, almost, you can then be really, really up close. So it's and you can't imagine that in other championships. That's where I have to say, IMSA they're the leaders for me in terms of fan engagement, fan access, entertainment, etc. I think they are showing the way for sure.
Yeah, I was going to say, well, go back to Daytona in a bit because it's actually like a race that I want to talk about. But obviously, with it being my first time, but have you watched any other series as well, like in the past? So basically, this is before you got into commentating. Is there any other series that you've watched? Say, for example, like V8 Supercars, Michelin Pilot Challenge, that sort of thing.
Oh yeah, all sorts. I mean, absolutely all sorts. And I think when I decided to chase the dream of becoming a commentator in motorsport, I really, really wanted to be to define myself as a multidiscipline commentator. So to be as capable to commentate on any of the series you've just mentioned, or in rallying, or in MotoGP, World Superbike, British Superbike, etc. Really, any kind of racing, I could lend myself to it. That was my theory, and I've kept to that theory. I mean, in the couple of years prior to making that decision to go for it, I was watching a lot of stuff. So you'd watch Le Mans, British Touring Car, British Superbikes, World Superbikes, MotoGP, Moto2, Moto3. It was anything that was on the telly for racing. And I wouldn't say that's been absolutely consistent from the age of 5 to now. When I was in my teens, I was always super interested in cars, but I was very focused on playing golf at the time and trying to be a golf pro. That maybe took my eye off racing a little bit, and then towards sort of 2000 one of the big turning points actually was 2010. I remember I was kind of getting a little bit disenfranchised with golf, and my game wasn't very good, and kind of was realizing that I wasn't going to make it. And I remember sitting watching the Masters golf, and I felt like I was only really watching it because everyone else was watching it. And I flicked over to MotoGP, and Valentino Rossi won the race, opening round of the season at Qatar. And I thought, this is just fantastic. And that, I think, was a turning point that never really... I think that from there on, from like the age of 20, I'm 36 now, it's been pretty much... It's been a constant rolling ball of momentum since then.
Yeah, I'm sort of the same. With the series, I'm kind of, when I was younger, I would pretty much watch anything if I had 2 wheels, 4 wheels, that sort of thing. I mean, I used to be a massive World Superbike fan because at the time I was a massive Troy Bayliss fan. Some people would probably say like, "Oh, why did you not support someone like Cal Fogarty with him being British?" But I was basically, I don't know why. It's just Troy Bayliss is one of those riders that I always liked watching, just because he had that kind of like spectacular riding style. He was pretty much just like all out, and I always remember watching on TV at the time. I think it was British Eurosport when 2002, when him and Colin Edwards had an epic battle for the win at Imola, I think it was. And was it Imola or was it I can't remember.
I think you're right. Yeah.
Yeah, 2002. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They had that epic battle. Like every lap, they would be swapping positions, and it was just like this. I was like, I love this. And then just the way with the World Superbikes has gone now, it's kind of my interest is kind of like like I'll still keep an eye on it, but I'm not like a like diehard into like World Superbikes now or motorbike racing in general. It's just it just feels MotoGP especially. It just feels too with like all the traction control and like big wings and that. It just feels too gimmicky.
Yeah, I think I agree with you with MotoGP. I think MotoGP was in a great spot, and then it's got out of control with the aerodynamics have made racing overtaking much more difficult, and that is the USP for motorbike racing is genuine, real overtaking. I mean, we've seen what's going on in F1. I mean, there's a premium on real overtaking, and motorbikes always is got a big advantage there. But yeah, with the ride height devices and the aerodynamics particularly, I think they need to get rid of all of that. I know they're going to get rid of the ride height devices, but the aero is still going to be a part of it. So I mean, I still watch every MotoGP race. I love it. But it's I agree with you. I think it's got too complex for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think the best part about last season in MotoGP, I know some people haven't really been a fan of him in the past, just because of the way he's raced people or the way he used to ride in that when he was at a Repsol Honda. But I think last season it was good. It was great to see Marc Marquez come back and win the championship, considering all the injuries he's had, like back in, was it 2020, 21, the 22 I'm not 100% sure.
It was 2020, when his arm was completely destroyed. How he came back to the sport at all after that, at any level, is a miracle. How much he's had to dig deep to get back on a motorbike, let alone a racing motorbike, let alone get on a podium or win a race, or indeed pulverise everybody across a championship. I think actually last year in 25, that was his most dominant championship, even more than 2014 on the Honda. Nobody else was in the same postcode as him. He might have made the race look tighter than it was, but he was just playing with them, and then he'd go, right, I'm bored now, push, and off he'd go. I mean, for me, it's one of the greatest comeback stories in motorcycle sport, and there are many in motorcycle sport, because of course it's such a dangerous certainly a lot more dangerous than car racing. So the injuries that these riders have to overcome is amazing. But Mark, I mean, he is special. I think he's maybe going to have it a little bit more difficult this year, but my money's still on him.
Yeah, I think if I was to pick a championship winner, I don't think he'll be as dominant this year, because there's loads of teams improving. I mean, when you look at Aprilia, for example, with Marco Bezzecchi, I mean, the job he's done with them, and basically he's basically kind of went to that team. It took him a while to get to grips with like the environment and that sort of thing, with it being a factory team. But I think he's grabbed that opportunity with both hands and basically showed that shown why he should be the team leader of that team, because he's helped develop that bike. And it might sound harsh towards Jorge Martin, because obviously he was out injured, but I think like Marco Bezzecchi's pretty much stamped his claim as the number one rider, and I think I would like to see him challenge for the championship. I don't think he'll win it, but I would like to see him challenge Marquez, just to see how he stack up. But I think this season will be interesting for sure.
Definitely.
And moving on to sim racing as well, how did your involvement come about with there? I mean, obviously, like myself, my first involvement with sim racing was probably back in, maybe not sim racing as it was then, but say like back in the old PlayStation 1 days with the Toker touring games.
Well, I mean, I've always been. I got a PlayStation. I don't know. Maybe it would have been about 8 or 9 years old, something like that, and that was the Toka touring car game at that time. And then Colin McRae Rally came shortly after, and I remember the following Christmas getting a Jordan F1 steering wheel. So it was kind of like getting a steering wheel was really cool. And then Gran Turismo, oh my goodness, the amount of childhood hours I spent on Gran Turismo 1, 2, and then 3 and on. I mean, that was a huge influence on me when I was younger. V Rally,
Yep.
I remember V Rally. What else? Yeah, those were the main ones, I would say. All the Colin McRae games, all the Gran Turismo games, V Rally, etc. Always racing games. But more recently, when I still lived in my flat in Perth, I bought a play seat and a proper steering wheel to play Forza 7 on my Xbox. And then it was maybe a year or two later, discovered iRacing. I think it was maybe January 2020 actually, where I got into iRacing for the first time, and then it's gone from there. But sim racing, I would never ever have. I don't know if I'd even would have been able to got a start at all in commentary without sim racing. I was very, very grateful to get an opportunity with Not Kill. I wrote to Not Kill and got a commentary there, but that would have been one aspect, but that would have taken a lot longer to climb up the ladder and develop the skills if I was only doing that and sim racing didn't exist. Sim racing was, and the timing was perfect from when I really started commentating regularly, was that lockdown happened and there was much more sim racing going on than there were commentators. So that opened up so much opportunity to get on air and just start commentating, just build up a skill, start from scratch. I'm a firm believer it takes 10,000 hours to be world class at something, and the only way you can do that is by building up those hours. So I will forever be indebted to Sean Ambrose and Joe Peake at Global Sim Racing Channel, who gave me loads of opportunities and opened up categories of motorsport I'd never really paid attention to before. Short track, dirt oval racing, and I was aware of NASCAR and IndyCar, but I'd have been lying if I said I followed it closely. But I got much more of an understanding of that, and then the stuff that was more familiar, sports cars, etc. So that was it, and then started working with the guys at RaceSpot, which I still do, and the iRacing's own network as well. And I still do commentate sim racing probably a couple of times a month, something like that, just to try and keep sharp. And particularly through the winter months, through the off-season time, it's good to do that as well. So sim racing's been a key part of not only getting a start, but also developing the skill and keeping the skill sharp.
Yeah, but with sim racing as well, obviously you say like you've commentated on RaceSpot, or commentated for RaceSpot and GSRC, but I think when it comes to sim racing series that you've commentated on, I believe the ones I remember is basically I know you've commentated on races for the GT World Championship. What else? The name slips my mind, but it runs on a Wednesday, or it has run on a Wednesday. Is it the
Porsche Club?
Porsche Club of Great Britain. That's it.
Yeah, that was my first one. Yeah, well remembered. Yeah, Porsche Club Great Britain, which is not far away from its 10th season, I understand. And I remember the first season in 2020, where a lot of Porsche Club racers were again not able to. Some racers, some members weren't able to get out to club meets or weren't able to go racing, so they all got simulators and started racing together, and that was my very, very first commentary that I did. So that was, we broadcast on Sim Racers World TV. It's now on RaceSpot, and I think the support I got from the guys racing in that, who really took an interest in my commentary career developing and would send me nice messages, that they'd heard me on a broadcast or something like that. That was really, really gave me a big boost to know that they were behind me and behind the kind of journey, and that I still enjoy being part of the Porsche Club Great Britain commentary team.
Yeah, and like after a broadcast as well, or basically a broadcast, is there any time that you've kind of afterwards thought to yourself, like, oh, was it good, or could I have done this better, or said this better, or kind of introduced this better? Like, I guess, like, have you? I guess you could call it self-critiquing, if you like. is there any point it's ever kind of got to you in a way? So basically, you start overthinking it, and basically, oh, I could have done this better, or I didn't do a good job like I thought I could do. Like how do you deal with that if you're kind of like maybe self doubting yourself? Is it just one of those things that like basically just brush it off and move on?
I found it's a good question. I found that generally it's better to if a broadcast goes really well, not to look back at it, not to look at if there's nice comments or anything like that, just to tick it off and say that went well, you delivered. But if you feel that a broadcast has gone badly, it's always good to watch it back for two reasons. Mostly, it's because it's never as bad as you think it was. But it takes you to listen to it back and go, actually, that wasn't as disastrous as I thought. But if there are things that didn't go right, you can then analyse them and then try and implement it for the future. So there's also, I have to say, a lot of my development and style as a commentator has come more from advice of others, and that's one of the biggest or one of many great things of working with the Radio Show Limited team is not only do you get to work on loads of really cool events, you also have you've got John Hindhoff, who's an incredibly experienced broadcaster, but also John's wife Eve, who runs the business, who listens to more output than most big producers and any of the big broadcasters will. I mean, she's listening to every single minute of output we have, and they have, rightly so, have a strict house style of do's and don'ts, because a lot of the time we're commentating for TV and radio simultaneously. Yeah. So that is something you're always having to keep that in mind. So you can't say, oh, look at that, because someone listening on radio, they can't look at it. Mm-hmm. So you have to go, there's the number 64 Ford Mustang turning right into Eau Rouge or whatever, or part of Eau Rouge, or whatever it is. So I've been really lucky to have that constructive criticism and room to grow and make errors within the Radio Show Limited framework, and that comes all from John and from Eve. So I had an early case of the absolutely disease, as Eve calls it, and thankfully she managed to cure my absolutely disease. When you wonder what absolutely disease is, if you listen to commentaries, and if, say for example, the lead commentators will make a point and the co-commentator will start whatever they're going to say with absolutely, you hear it at the very highest level. So, and sometimes you just say it when you can't think quite what to say next. You know you've got roughly something brewing, but you think, right, I need to bridge the gap. Particularly when you're commentating for radio, you go, I can't have dead air. So you go, absolutely. So luckily, Eve was able to nip that in the bud early and cured my absolutely disease, which I'm not the only person in the team I understand in the past who's had to have their absolutely disease cured.
Yeah, I mean, I've had that not with commentating, but with there was an episode of the podcast when I first brought it back earlier this year that I recorded, and then basically the day after, it was like one of my good friends that I done an episode with, and it was the day after I was listening back, and like I was getting really frustrated because I was listening back and I thought, oh, why did I say this, or why did I do that? And it was like I was getting really worked up to the point I was getting to me like in my head, and I'm like, I was like getting so frustrated. And then like basically my friend that I recorded it with, she has a podcast as well, and then she kept telling me like, just like, don't get worked up, just calm down. It's like, it's not as bad as you think. Yeah, you might have made some mistakes, but it's like, she said to me like, oh, you've not done an episode or a podcast episode for basically nearly 3 years, so you're bound to make mistakes. So yeah, she was just like, just relax, don't get worked up about it, because if you get worked up about it, it gets to the head, and then basically you'll start like overthinking sometimes. But I mean, I'll admit that I kind of like, I suffer from bad anxiety sometimes, so like I start overthinking, like when people say like, oh, if they say like, oh, that was great to listen to, great job, but like I overthink sometimes. I guess like second guess myself. Like, do they really mean it, or are they only saying that because they want me to hear that? So it's kind of, I guess it was a case. I guess it was kind of a case of like self doubting myself, if you like. So, but it's definitely something that I'm working on to try and kind of like just relax more.
Yeah, I think you'd be amazed how many people in the broadcasting industry and the entertainment industry as a whole contend with that feeling. I certainly contend with that feeling on a regular basis, and yeah, it's very, very normal. I think one of the ways to cope with it is if you think, if you've got typical bad habits or mistakes or errors or whatever you want to call them, you write them down, and then you think, rather than go, right, don't do that, you think, right, what do I do that's the positive reverse of that, if you like. So I love listening to John Beattie, who was on Radio Scotland, and still is from time to time. Listen to him interview people. He's incredibly concise with his interview questions. When I'm interviewing, I can go off on big long tangents, and then before the person that you're interviewing, they've gone to sleep almost. But so rather than go, don't ask long questions, I would write, do ask concise questions or do ask short questions. You see what I mean? So that you're thinking, right, what is the general bad habit? Which everybody has them. Every commentator, every athlete has bad habits that they will eradicate over time, and then a new one might pop up, and then they've got to deal with that. But I've found that's a good way to deal with it, is to think, what is the positive correction rather than the negative correction.
Yeah, I mean, it's something I've started like basically. I've kind of basically. There's been a few times I've listened back and kind of I guess I'll take notes and basically. But if there's anything that I spot that I need to work on, I'll write it down and basically make sure to work on that for next time. Because I know that one of my friends, he was listening to a podcast episode that I recorded last week, I think, and then basically she was saying like, oh, the only thing I noticed was basically like sometimes you'll talk too quick, or you won't stop and take a breath for say like a couple of seconds. So just kind of like minor things like that, and so it's basically that sort of thing I take on board now. If that was a couple of months ago, I would have got worked up about it, like, oh, why did I do this? But now it's kind of one of those things that I'm working on, just to just be like, I just say to myself, like, yeah, you might have messed something up, or like basically what you're trying to say, you might have kind of like jumbled it up in your mouth, sort of, so to speak. So, but it's one of those things that I say to myself now. If I mess up what I'm trying to say, or even if I stutter from time to time, it's like basically I just learn to kind of like roll with it.
Yeah, good idea.
So yeah, it's one of those things. Like basically, I don't let it get to me now. Otherwise, if I start overthinking it, like I say, it gets in my head a little bit. So, but it's like you say, it's basically just part of learning, and basically like you move on. How did you first stop? I think I asked you this before in a previous episode that we did, but how did your first opportunity come around to call a real life series with Radio Show Limited?
Eve and I have this. Is John Hydroff's wife, John is the voice of Radio Le Mans, and if there were a face, he would be. But actually, the person running the business and making it the success that it is, that's Eve. She does a lot of stuff behind the scenes, which very few people would realise, which really makes the whole operation tick. And therefore, she's a very busy lady. So we talk about this a lot, and I'm always reminded how grateful I am for the opportunities and to get to work on all the different things that they cover. But how did I get onto it? Well, I have to say that we talk about it a lot, and Eve refers to it as polite persistence. So my background prior to being a commentator was in sales, and my dad, who I worked for at the time, he explained to me when I started as a salesman, he said there's 3 stages of selling. He says there's stage 1 is planning and preparation, stage 2 is the actual process of selling, of convincing somebody to buy something, and stage 3 is the follow-up. And he says, I can assure you that stage 2, the act of trying to convince somebody to buy something, is the least important thing to be a successful salesperson, which you would think it would be the other way around.
Yep.
But actually it's the planning and preparation and the follow-up. And actually being a freelance commentator, that set of skills and those practices have served me well. So first of all, you have to get yourself in the seat in the first place, so if you imagine using the analogy of the salesperson, the bit of convincing somebody to buy something, that would be the act of actually commentating on air, and that's the actual part of when you're on air is the bit where you're probably at your most relaxed, and it's more routine. When you're actually on air, you're just following the story of whatever it is you're covering. But the planning and preparation side is actually, making sure that you're prepared for the event, having the right notes, etc. But also getting yourself in the seat in the first place. And there's of course loads of different. There's a huge amount of opportunities potentially, but there's also an even bigger number of people that want them. So you have to try and get yourself into those seats, and that just requires a lot of persistence. You need to identify who the decision makers are, a bit like in sales, and then you have to pitch yourself to them, and it's highly, highly unlikely that you'll get a yes or a no initially. It will take a while. You're always dealing with someone who's busy and has a lot on their plate and have their choice. So with Radio Show Limited, it was just more, I really wanted to work with them. I loved all the stuff that they were covering, and I just sort of politely and persistently kept sending my work, and that was where the sim racing side of things was really helpful, because I always had footage that I could send. So I was commentating multiple times a week, so I could keep sending my output, and then Eve could actually see how my commentary skills were progressing over time. Then there was a few sim races where it was the iRacing Sebring 12 hours, where John was brought in to be a commentator and I was one of the other commentators. So then he got to commentate alongside me and got to see if there was a kind of groove there. So it wasn't one thing was the reason. It's certainly in my experience, there's never ever been a time where my phone has rung and it's hello, it's producer from X big series or X big broadcaster and we want you. Never really works like that, not in my experience anyway. I'm sure it does for others, but more often than not, it's a constant building and constant contact with a broad number of people. And some, there's some places where I've probably tried for 5 years and not got anywhere, but I'm not going to give up. So it's you give up until you're told. Yeah, you keep going until you're told no, and even then you go, well, no, not right now, but then you keep going for future, because it's changing all the time.
And then how do you find working with not just with Radio Show Limited, but also obviously you've commentated on IMSA Radio as well at Daytona, Sebring, I've also the Watkins Glen 6 hours and Petit Le Mans. How do you not just that, but how do you find working with the team? Obviously, you've got the likes of Johnny Palmer, Bruce Jones. Who else? You've got Ryan Marine. Who I remember that you and him were calling the nighttime hours, I think, or the middle of the night when it was during the fog hours. How do you find working with the team? Is there a good chemistry, a good morale?
Yeah, there is. They're a wonderful group of people. I mean, Johnny Palmer for me is one of the very best I've ever worked with. I mean, he is so talented. He's so good. We did the last couple of hours of the Daytona 24-hour in 2025, and it was some of the most invigorating and exciting commentary I've ever been involved with. And Johnny led the show. He just it appears to come so easy to him. I'm sure it doesn't, but he makes it look just so easy. He's very, very good at what he does. Ryan as well. Ryan's a wonderful guy to work with. He's just, whenever, from the minute you come down to breakfast in the morning to the minute you go back to the hotel at night, he's just a positive influence, and he's so professional at what he does. He's always putting in the work behind the scenes, and that makes him a joy to work with. Arjuna has been it's someone like me who's sim racing has been a huge part of their development. Arjuna had never done pit lane reporting until last year, and he got put in on one of the biggest sports car races in the world at Watkins Glen, where we were based remotely, and there was technical challenges, and I think many other people would have had a nightmare in that scenario, and he just looked like he'd been a pit lane reporter for 10 years. I've never seen anything quite like it, and Arjuna's a great guy to work with as well. So there's so many in the team. You know, some of the stories that John has of, you know, being at the very early days of the American Le Mans series, being at the first Petite Le Mans, 35 years at Le Mans, and hearing all these stories about the Audi glory days and things like that. It's there's and you know, then you speak to Bruce about who's been in motorsport media for over 30 years and the people that he's met in his time. Then Peter Snowden, who raced the Leicester Storm, and I always love
I love his stories.
Yeah, Snowy's he's very modest on air. He likes to play it down, but he was a GT1 legend. He raced the Viper, he raced the Leicester Storm. He's got some great stories on and off track, actually. Some of which not repeatable on this program. But yeah, so, I mean, I'm not even scratching the surface of the team. So yeah, we're lucky.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned Peter Snowden as well. I mean, I'm trying to think when I first came across his name. Obviously, he raced in the basically back in the GT the GTA heyday, if you like. But basically, it was loads of Leicester Storms, Vipers, you name it. They were there, and I first came across him. I think it was the Nürburgring Landstracker series. That's where I first came across his commentary, and I just listened to him, and I was thinking to myself, I like this person's style of commentary, because he's not shouting, he's not going over the top or anything like that. It's just nice and relaxed, and then it's sort of, that's why I like listening to Ryan, for example, as well, because again, he's great at what he does. He does a great job of calling races, but he doesn't feel the need to shout all the time. It's basically kind of he's just calling the accent what's in front of him, but he's not feeling the need to kind of shout all the time. So
yeah,
but it's one of those things.
Endurance racing, yeah. I think it really suits that style of racing for sure. And then you ramp up the energy when required. But he's very good. You're right at turning the dial of what energy to put in at any particular time. And
what would your advice be for anyone that's looking to get into maybe by real life motorsport commentary? Maybe someone is maybe thinking about it but is not sure how to go about it. What would your advice be to them? Would it be something maybe start commentating at the local track, for example? Is it?
Yeah.
Say again, example like club level sort of thing.
Definitely, and it's something that it's a good way to get into it, and it's a good thing to do, even if you're an experienced commentator. I mean, it's like anything. The hours and the game time is so important. You look at the best drivers in the game in sports cars. We think Kevin Estre, Augusto Farfus, Nicky Team. I'm trying to pick one from each manufacturer. Alessandro Pierguidi, whoever you want. They are in these cars all the time. Are they always driving in the World Endurance Championship or IMSA? No, they're in all sorts of different things. They might get placed in British GT. They might get placed with a team in Creventic. They might be in GT Open. It doesn't necessarily always have to be at the very top professional level. They are there where customers of their manufacturer that they work for are running cars. So to bring that back to commentary, whether if you're a budding commentator, it's always good to have a breadth of experience in different things, and because also you never know when one might stop. there might be a change of producer, it could be a change of overall promoter, it could be anything. So having a good breadth is important. If you're trying to get into commentary from a word go, I'm not lying here. I googled how to become a racing commentator. That is what, and an article came up. Red Bull Media House, and Red Bull are now a client. And it had a list of a kind of bullet point list of what you could do. One was coming from a journalistic background, so writing about cars, and now there are so many platforms where you can write about cars and motorsport. You don't need someone to commission you to write. You can just get writing. So you can write on Substack is one where lots of independent writers go on and write blogs and things like that, or Reddit or something like that. But I'd say Substack's a really good one. There used to be Drive Tribe, which I wrote on when I was getting started. It was a great way of just learning that skill. And when you write about anything, you learn so much about that topic. So that's one way. Starting up your own podcast, something that it's dead easy to do, and it allows you to get on air, start talking on air, and interview people as well. And you will always be amazed how many people will, if you contact them and ask them politely to come on your show, you would be amazed who will say yes to coming on your show. And generally, in my experience, it's the big names that are willing to do it more than the others. The big names are big names for a reason, because they've got the personality to go with their skill. And then, on your point, getting in contact with your local circuit, or if you're lucky enough to live near multiple circuits, get in touch with them all. LinkedIn is a very good tool, even to find out who the decision makers are. Even now, this wasn't even a thing that 5 years ago. ChatGPT, you can go, who is in charge of commentary for Silverstone? And it'll bring up an explanation, and you can then fact check if that's the case or not. So you can then find a name, find someone senior, and try and contact them through LinkedIn, or if you've managed to get their email address, send them an email as a first point. And then if you don't, maybe even get a telephone number, always pick up the phone and say what you're trying to do. Or even, there is nothing wrong with sending an old-fashioned letter, because at least it's going to land on their desk. They have to open it. Lands on their desk, and they have to open it. So at least you've got their attention. So there's lots of different ways. I think you just got to think, right, where do I want, at the top level, where do I want to commentate? Okay, who's in charge of picking who commentates there? Find them. Right, I need to contact them, and then I'm going to keep contacting them until they give me the chance. And in the meantime, I'm going to do as much commentary as I can. Sim racing is a great place to start. Get in touch with Race Spots, with Apex Racing, with iRacing themselves. There's so many different channels that you can get involved with. Keep commentating as much as you can with them, and then you've got footage that you can send to the to where you want to get to, and you'll climb the ladder accordingly. It won't happen overnight, but if you stick at it, it will come.
And what would your, I don't know if it comes under real life motorsport commentary, but what would your advice be for people that want to, say for example, like I mentioned earlier, I'm going to Daytona next year, and I would absolutely love to go up to drivers and maybe ask them for not a full interview, but maybe just like a couple of minutes of their time. How would you go for, basically, how would I go about that, babe? Like, is there any advice as such to kind of prepare for that? Like I say, I get bad anxiety sometimes, so I don't want to be just not because I don't want to go up and not interview them, but it's more I don't want to bother them, or I feel like I'm being maybe a hindrance if they're busy.
Well, do you know what, Ryan? I'm exactly the same. I'm exactly like that. To this day, I really, really struggle doorstepping people in a paddock. I think it's my sales background, where I wouldn't walk into a whiskey shop without an appointment trying to pitch to the owner of the whiskey shop to sell them some whiskey like I used to. But if I was going in with an appointment, I'd go in with 100 times the confidence as I would without one. So I did exactly the same thing, actually, and it was a big turning point in deciding to go from my full-time job in whiskey to taking this on. And I had the Peter MacKay Motorsport podcast at the time, and I had a list of people who were in the race who I wanted to interview. And there's various ways of getting in contact. Some drivers have their own websites or through social media that they're easily reachable. Some are a lot harder than that. But one way that usually is the best way to do it is to look at what team they're driving for. And each team will have a PR person, who is easy to find. It'll be on their website, or again through LinkedIn, or go into ChatGPT and say, who is the PR representative for AO Racing or Ford Racing or Porsche Motorsport North America or whatever, and you politely ask them, say, I've got this podcast. Can I have 10 minutes of X driver's time? When would fit for them? And you'd be amazed actually that most PR people will try and make something happen for you. And the thing is you don't. I think now it used to be a lot easier to get a media pass, but now it's so busy that it's harder to do that. But it's worth trying to apply for a media credential. But even if you can't, you actually don't even need a media credential now, because the drivers are always walking about in the public area. The PR team can bring them to the garage. You can interview them at the garage. I see that happening all the time. And like I say, if you only need 5 to 10 minutes with them, that's usually possible to be. It's usually possible to be accommodated. I always just say the worst they can say is no. And I've never ever found. Never once have I had an impolite no. It's always been a really sorry, can't do it on this occasion. Yeah. We'll try and do it again another time. So I think as long as you're asking politely, you'll get a polite response, and you won't believe who will say yes. It's. I remember at Daytona, I got sat for an interview with Jordan, Ricky, and Wayne Taylor together, all three of them at the same time. Imagine that. An absolute nobody with no background at all, and the Team Penske's PR. And Wayne Taylor Racing's PR and Corvette Racing's PR, because Jordan was driving for Corvette at the time, Ricky was driving for Penske, and Wayne, of course, is owner of Wayne Taylor Racing. And the three of them, we went into the Wayne Taylor Racing truck and sat at the back of the Wayne Taylor Racing truck and had an interview for 15 minutes. So it's possible. It's absolutely, and the game hasn't changed so much in that time. Never be afraid to ask. Write your wish list, fire off the emails, and you will be amazed who says yes.
Yeah, because one of my friends has said as well, basically, she's like, she's kind of just said, like, basically, there's no, like you say, there's no harm in asking, like, basically, don't be afraid to go up, and if you see them walking about, ask if they've got maybe some time or a couple of minutes, say, to spare. But she said the same, as if they say no, it's nothing personal, it's just because they're maybe busy doing PR commitments, or maybe like busy with team debriefs or something like that, so... But
well, if it's a PR commitment, their PR commitment would be if you've got an appointment, they're probably on the way to someone who's booked an appointment. Whereas if you see a driver walking in the paddock, I can guarantee you they're normally not walking with spare time on their hands. They're usually going from one commitment to another, or they're going to eat, or they're going to get their driver's suit on, or whatever. So doorstepping them, I personally wouldn't advise to do. I think you're going to get a way better quality interview if you've got and the thing is, and I'm the same as you. I get that same anxiety. I hate feeling like you're bothering somebody when they're busy, because I just hate doing it. And I even now I really struggle with like that. So I often find I have to book in time with people in a paddock if I want to speak to them, and of course that limits me. And that was something where you asked me about the Radio Show Limited team and the IMSA Radio team. One person I have to mention, and I should have, and he's not in the team anymore, but I learned so much from him, is Jeremy Shaw.
Yeah.
Jeremy Shaw, the work that he put in behind the scenes, in between sessions, he was a dynamo. Every spare minute where he wasn't speaking into a microphone, he was straight over into the paddock. And it wasn't just the main championship. In every support championship, he would know all of them by name. And he would, I said, could I walk around the paddock with you? He goes, yeah, sure. And he would just walk into somebody's truck. And he would straight in. He didn't care. And I was like, I'd love to have that. Now, I personally don't have that within me. Maybe I do somehow, but I can't find it. So I think I'm on the same wavelength as you, where you don't want to doorstep somebody, so you don't have to. And actually, you might get better. And also, Jeremy was maybe trying to get a one-line answer on something. He wasn't trying to record a 10-minute program, which is what you're trying to do for the show. So, I would be definitely advising to book them ahead of time if you can.
Yeah, I mean, there's someone from Team Pesca that I've really wanted to interview, or I would love to interview if I get a chance next year when I'm over in Daytona, is Lauren Heinrich, because basically I would like to ask him some questions about basically like his journey through the ranks, basically start. I think he started off in sim racing on iRacing, I think, that was one of his first things anyway, and then basically ask him about basically his journey through like Porsche Carrera. Is it Carrera Cup Deutschland or Germany? I always get the name mixed up. So, but I would just he's one of those people that I would love to sit down, because I've always been a massive fan of his, and I would just like to kind of like basically ask him some questions, just to kind of like put it on my kind of like one of my bucket list things of like I interviewed one of my favorite drivers, and yeah, it's something I'll probably take your advice and try and maybe like contact a PR manager, a PR person, and say what they say. Like you say, if they say no, there's no harm done.
There is, and you think about it, in that race, you got 60 cars, 4 drivers in each. That's 240 drivers. So you've got there's a portion of them. Usually not always, but sometimes the owner drivers don't do PR. They have PR people to stop them doing PR, some of them, because they come there for fun, and they come there and they have privacy. But all the professionals, they know that they're in the entertainment business, and they know that driving the car, a bit like a point I made about commentary, when you're actually on air, that's the bit you could just sort of relax and enjoy. I dare say it's the same for a driver. They've worked so hard either to get the opportunity to be in a seat, or to raise the money to pay for them to be in that seat, and then finally, they get to drive the car at last. So for them, they know that there's a lot more to their job than just driving the car.
And then looking ahead to the rest of 2026, sorry. How are the plans? How is it looking so far for you? Is there anything set in stone?
Yeah, there's a few things. Yeah, I'm delighted that I'm going to get to return for another year with the European Rally Championship family, working as a stage end reporter, which is a huge privilege to be. You're right there in the heart of the action. I mean, and it's quite an intimate scenario actually, because you're sharing a moment with an athlete, and sometimes it can be a hard moment, sometimes it can be a really happy moment, and you're there, the first person they see when you open the door and they've reached the stop line, and the co-driver's getting the time card, and you're in there, and it's on live TV, and you go, and that's hugely exciting. I'll be doing a few World Rally Championship rounds as well in Canaries, Japan and Chile as well, so getting to do that at the World Championship level is exciting. It's an adrenaline rush. When you open the door and Oit Tanak gives you the 1,000-yard stare, and you've got to ask a sensible question. Believe me, that gets the blood flowing. So it puts you under pressure. But then there's so many cool things about doing that role. What else? Going to be fairly busy with sports car racing. Similar stuff to what I did last year as well, and that's great. Going to be doing Porsche Carrera Cup North America again, which is great. So no, I'm very lucky. I've got a good calendar for this year. Sometimes it can be unfortunate where you get clashes, where there's things like last year, for some reason everything just clicked perfectly, whereas this year there's a lot of things that clash. So for example, I was at Mugello last year, but that clashes the Sebring this year, and as much as you try, you can't be in two places at once. But that's what's roughly what's in the plan, and hopefully seeing the launch of my first book about the Porsche RS Spider, which I've written over the last few years, and that's due to be launched in time for Christmas. So we're just in the process of putting that all together and getting the layouts done at the moment. So that's going to be a big moment, and promoting that's going to take up a good bit of time too. So not just commentary, there's other things to keep me going as well.
And you talk about your book as well when it's final published. Is there, for anyone that's interested that might be listening, is there anywhere that they can is there plans to sell the book? And if so, where would they be able to?
Oh yeah,
Where would they be able to purchase it?
Yeah. So it's the book is going to be a Porsche Museum edition. So it will be able to be ordered directly through Porsche, but also through specialist booksellers as well. So yes, it will be very much for sale, and hopefully people enjoy reading it. I mean, it's got an amazing amount of first-hand accounts in it from pretty much all the drivers who competed in the car, some of the owners of the cars, the engineers, etc. In fact, I can show you one thing. I interviewed Marino Franchitti, and he drove the Dyson Racing RS Spider.
I remember that.
But he's the only guy to have raced the RS Spider, the Porsche, but also the Acura ARX at the time, which they were the big two rival cars at the time. So he provided a fascinating insight in the differences in philosophy between the two cars and how they behaved, and how the RS Spider was a lot better in dirty air, whereas the Acura wasn't as good in dirty air. But the Acura was very much a CFD car, whereas the Porsche was a little more traditional wind tunnel car. But he was just amazing. He gave so much time, and then a couple of days later he messaged me and he said, "Can I have your address?" I thought, I wonder what he needs my address for. And then about a week later, this turned up. A visor from the Thetford Norcold Dyson RS Spider. And on it says, "To Peter, wishing you all the best with your RS Spider book. Best wishes, Marino Franchitti. Here's my visor from 2008 Dyson RS Spider." It's one of my most treasured possessions. I put it beside my sim rig to try and give me inspiration, but unfortunately I can only really emulate Marino's hairstyle rather than his driving prowess. But that was such a nice thing for him to do. So I'm really excited for the guys that contributed to the book to see it as well.
That was great, and it's been a pleasure to have you on back on the show, Peter, and looking forward to listening to you in 2026, and looking forward to listening to you during the Sebring 12 Hours next weekend.
Thanks, Ryan. Thanks for inviting me.
And also as well, I've completely forgot. Is there anyone that you want to give a shout out to, like any social media stuff that you want to plug or anything like that?
Well, yeah, you can follow me on Instagram, which is at Peter_JK_MacKay. Usually try to keep that updated, or send us a connection request on LinkedIn. Be delighted to meet some new people. So yeah, that would be those would be the two things.
Great stuff. And if anyone wants to listen to the show on Spotify, you can search for the Satellite Racing Podcast on Spotify. You can follow the show on Instagram as well at the Sat Racing Cast, and also the same on Twitter. But that's it from me, from Peter, and to anyone that tunes in and watches the show in the future. Thanks very much, and we will see you next time.